Welcome everyone to our January edition of AZBioPEERS. Yes, it's 2026 and the year kicked off with the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. Well, not just JP Morgan, but an entire week of events where tens of thousands of life science investors and innovators and educators all come together to try and figure out how to forecast the future and equally important to build the relationships that grow their companies. So I am thrilled to have with us today my longtime friend, Lila Taylor from Demy-Colton. And Lila, why don't you introduce yourself to gang?
I would love to do that, and thank you for having me, Joan. As Joan mentioned, my name is Lila. I am the Chief Business Officer of Demy-Colton and have been for the last 12 years. Demy-Colton is an organization that only puts on events for life science. That includes Biotech Showcase during Healthcare Week, parallel to JP Morgan, and a series of other events. I'm a scientist by background and have worked inside biotech and platform companies. I've had the great pleasure of working closely with small to medium-sized companies, not just in biotech, large, small molecule delivery, medtech, but also tech bio and digital medicine. And of course, Arizona is a leader in many of those areas. So I was so glad to join today.
Well, and the standing joke is how many meetings does Joan have at JP Morgan? And I can tell you guys, Lila has a lot more than me.
Both fortunate and unfortunately.
Yes, we usually get together at some point and put our feet up because we're running all over town. So as we kick things off, talking about JPM, this was a really unusual JPM because the sun was shining.
Oh my, yeah.
And for the first time ever, I never had to bring out my umbrella once, which was awesome. But there's also been a lot of, concern about, some of the things that, are going on in San Francisco and how many companies would be there and, would the investors show up? So, Lila, using Biotech Showcase as an example, what did you guys see?
Well, let's start first with always the biggest question. Did the investors show up? Well, they certainly did. We had very high numbers. Let me give you the exact number of investors. And I always like to preface this because people say, who are investors at Biotech Showcase? And at all of our events, they are vetted. They must be accredited investors with funds ready to go. And we had this year 1,150 accredited and approved investors registered for Biotech Showcase. We had 250 companies present. So those are companies that actively pitch for funds and partnerships or who have major announcements to the industry. And these range from early seed stage companies, university spinouts, companies under 2 or 3 years old, right up to mid-stage public companies. The majority are from the United States, but we do have companies that come from as far away as Asia, South America, and of course Canada, who are big in Europe, of course, who are a big part of our program. We are now 18 years old, so we're kind of an established event with 2,800 attendees. We are not too far from the JP Morgan event, and we love the JP Morgan team. So it's not a competitive environment, it's a symbiotic environment. And as I had mentioned, I have the great pleasure of working with a number of the early stage companies. So yeah, it was a very strong year. I think JP Morgan, or I should say Healthcare Week, is evolving as all healthy things should. So we are seeing some changes, Joan.
Well, and it's interesting because I've had the opportunity, thanks to you and Sarah, of moderating at Biotech Showcase in the company presentations now for 15 years. And, what I have seen of young companies coming through that later, make national news.
Yes.
And, that's really important because, one of the things that people talk about is, I go and pitch at these things and I don't come back with a check. Where's my return on investment? Um, and I always remind them that people are not walking around with checkbooks. People are walking around looking for opportunities and building relationships. Can you kind of comment on that a little bit?
Yes, I can comment on many aspects and dimensions of that type of relationship. So, first, from the investor's point of view, I had a major strategic investor say in a webinar recently, just because we don't give you a check doesn't mean that we're not watching you now. They are watching you long term to see what your decisions are, the movement in your programs, your focus, who your team is, and even the quality of your presentations over time. Before an investor invests, at least from my experience, one of the things I've done in my past is help screen companies for investor groups, is they're looking for your ability to be consistent over time. Now, I do know I'm in the conference industry, but I don't say this for business reasons. I say this from experience. You need to be out there and you need to be out there in person. Present at business development conferences, at conferences in your scientific specialty, go to your local events, have press releases that talk about the conferences and things you do. And I don't mean necessarily spending a bunch of money to do a press release over the wire, but you can put a press release on your website and in your social media. Let people know what you're doing, communicate effectively, and be consistent.
That's great.
Okay.
Okay, so now, obviously, this session is called the Buzz at JPM.
Mhm.
And, one of the biggest times of the year for announcements is during JP Morgan Healthcare Week. I didn't see a lot of announcements. Did you?
I really looked at this, and from what I understand, speaking to people who have a much more longer career in the industry, is that there were a lot of announcements running up the entire year of 2025. So what I had heard people say is that people were not necessarily waiting. They were more capitalizing on announcements they had already made. What do you think, Joan? What were your thoughts? Because I had the same question myself. What was
Well,
different?
it's interesting. I remember because obviously Bristol Myers Squibb had the big announcement a few years back of the acquisition of Celgene,
Mhm.
and that impacted Arizona because Abraxis Biosciences, which was part of Celgene, is in our own backyard. Um, but there weren't those blockbuster announcements this year. There were a lot of smaller announcements and updates, pretty much for the analyst benefit, right?
Mhm.
But but overall, we didn't see those big pops, which kind of brings me to some of the numbers I've been looking at, which is where's the dry powder? And right now, private equity is sitting on about $1 trillion. Strategics, big pharma, Medtech, et cetera, those global names that we all know. Again, they're sitting on about $1 trillion. So there's a lot of big money out there for deals. And I think that, especially in the pharma space where they're looking at patent cliffs that are significant between now and 2030, they're going to be looking for those later stage assets that they can use to fill their portfolio gaps as some of those things expire. So, on the larger side, I think we're seeing a lot of activity. When we look at the emerging biotech market, I didn't hear a whole lot of bright lights and positivity coming out of that, right? People were almost saying it was a two-phase market where, the later stage assets were looking at, great opportunities this coming year, but it was still a pretty tough market if you're not going to be exiting, in a shorter time horizon. and that is not just my opinion. That is very consistent with what the analysts are coming out with, which means we have to be smarter on how we approach investors.
We really do. And I am seeing some bright lights as well. One of the things I think of is who led our Medtech session, though they don't just invest in Medtech. Portfolio is a specialty investor in women's health and early stage companies as well. So there are investors out there who are investing in early stage, but as you said, Joan, we need to be more strategic, make sure that your presentations are smarter, be out there, uh, talk to people, use your connections to get the right meetings. Just because things are tighter doesn't mean that you can't get what you need.
The other thing I kind of noticed at JPM this year is I look at the coffee shops and the hotel lobbies to kind of get a feel for the buzz.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting that there were so many events going on that the lobbies weren't as crowded as they used to be, right? A lot of the thought leaders were inside of Biotech Showcase. They were inside of Wushi's event. They were inside of JP Morgan. They weren't necessarily, hanging out in lobbies and coffee shops the way they normally do.
I think you're absolutely right. And the way that you could really quantify that is you're like, wow, I'm not seeing people in the coffee shops. Where are they? And then you would come out for the receptions in the
Mm-hmm.
evenings, and it would be absolute crowd control was necessary. So people were inside of the official events a lot of the time this year, despite the good weather. I really did see that, Joan. I think you're right.
Yeah, we see it every year. As you know, AZBio, along with a group we call the State Bio Friends. So there are 13 states that come together to host a reception at the Marker Hotel to kick off the week. And, we usually average about 700 registrations for that event. We take over both ballrooms at the Marker Hotel. And we were turning people away. We hit capacity we couldn't take anymore. So,
I
there's a desire for that.
I will say I was there ready to go to that event, which is one of my favorites of the week. When it opened, the moment it opened, I was one of the first people in, and it was still kind of, it was more crowded than I'd ever seen it over the last 10 years.
No. And, we're very, very lucky. We're very appreciative to the folks at the Marker because they've worked with us now for 2 decades on that event, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But we've now filled both ballrooms. We're pretty much at the limit.
That's it, yeah.
That's it. So, as we think about, partnering meetings, Sarah and I were talking about this earlier this week, and the fact that, the idea of a partnering system was something that Sarah actually developed when she was at Bio.
Yes.
Um, how important is it to get those meetings scheduled early?
It is very important to get the meeting scheduled early, and there's more, as you know, but I'll share it. There's more to it than that. Using the partnering systems, whichever one you use, wisely. And I am going to reference several webinars I've done on the topic, but being clear, for instance, with Biotech Showcase, you even get elevated visibility as a presenting company if you are. So use all the assets, put a video in your profile so that people see it. Have a full, any member of your team that's there should have a full bio. You should talk about, of course, non-confidentially, any assets you have. And make yourself easy to search and do very specific outreach. If there's one piece of free advice I could give to early stage companies, is when you do your outreach to investors, know who they are, tell them why you want to meet with them and why you're a fit and what you are doing. The easier you make it for the other person to accept that meeting will guarantee you will be a big part of your success. The other thing, just to come back, I know it's a little off topic, but you brought up the receptions. Get to those receptions during any event. One of the best resources are your state organizations, but also your service providers. Talk to your law firm, talk to your contract research organizations, let them know you want to be included in their receptions and events.
And that is a really important point, not just during conference time, but all the time.
Mhm.
You know, my lawyer, my accountant, my service provider, professional services organization, whoever I'm dealing with, okay, their network should be your network. And, it is not out of line for you to ask, what investors do you know? Who are you working with? Am I a good fit for an investor that you know? Because quite frankly, if I am, working in a space that's therapeutic, okay, then if they only do med device, don't waste your time. I'm not
Exactly.
going to
Exactly.
switch. If I am, focusing on the United States, I am not intending to go outside of the United States at this time. Spending time talking to an organization that wants you to come to their country to set up operations, if you're not ready for that yet, okay, then focus on the people that you are ready for
Right.
and go to the events that you are ready for. So, for instance, a lot of people ask me, how do I get inside of JP Morgan, the JP Morgan? And the answer is, you know, why do you want to be there?
Yeah, find out first.
Because until you're ready for the analysts, until you're ready for, that part of the journey, you're wasting your time there because the people that are there are the ones that need to have those meetings with the companies that they're there to meet. And so you're a distraction. You don't want to be
Hmm.
a distraction. You want to be added value. And so plan your week so that you are where your audience hangs out. Lila?
No, exactly. I couldn't possibly agree more. And I know that we have a lot of people with scientific backgrounds. So what I would liken it to is, of course, everybody wants to be in nature, but you only want to be in nature when you have a really spectacular set of results. So make sure that you're publishing correctly, make sure that you are attending the right events and talking to the people who are going to be helpful to your current stage.
Absolutely. So, when we look at current events, I think it's important because that was a big topic at the conferences, and I did not exclusively go to Biotech Showcase. I was at Resi and I was at the Incubate conference and a number of the CRO conferences and things of that nature. And a lot of the things that were being discussed have to do with current events. And so investors make decisions based on risk calculations.
Yes.
And so when things are in flux, it's hard to make those risk calculations. And so, you know, especially younger companies, because as I said earlier, we're talking about a $300 billion patent cliff in drugs alone between now and 2030, right? They have to fill their pipelines, but they have to fill their pipelines with things that are going to be ready in time to fill the hole, which means it's not an early stage asset. And so, um, as companies are positioning themselves, how can they um, show that they have the capacity internally to hit milestones and reduce risk? What are some of the things that investors are looking for?
So that is a wonderful question, and I have a multi-part answer to that. One of the things that's very important to investors who are avoiding risk, well, all times are different, but now is a risk-averse time. Show them that you're concentrated on particular programs and assets. If you have other applications for your technology or molecules, be sure that when you have any literature about that or presenting or have it on your website, be clear where you're focusing your effort and show that you have other possibilities, but this is where we're going and we are moving at speed towards this. Secondly, your team is very much what everyone will judge you on.
Mm-hmm.
So and if you're a young company, it's often founders and a couple of folks, but have good advisors. Reach out to folks who you can have as your advisors, board members, if that's appropriate, who are going to be able to help direct you and connect you with the right people. Having been inside biotech, your advisors are also a great way to connect you with
Mm-hmm.
investors. Also, this seems basic, but it's really important. If you are in a presentation or meeting with an investor, if you don't know the answer to something, just say, I don't know. Can I get back to you with that information? That's appreciated. And finally, make sure to stay in contact with investors. Add them to your updates when you have relevant updates.
Yeah.
So showing that you're relevant and that you're thinking about what they need says to them, this is a sharp team. This is a team that's thinking. I feel like placing a bet with them is a good move. Show them that their bets are de-risked as much as you can.
And I think the other thing that's important is you have to have a database. You have to be, whether you're doing it with an Excel spreadsheet or you're using a more advanced, platform to manage your pipeline of investor conversations. Some of these relationships take years to build.
They do.
And if you're having a meeting with an analyst and they mention that they just got married, right? you know, that's something to remember, right? Because then years later, they're going to be telling you that they just had kids and they just had this. And, you know, asking a simple personal, how's the family doing? It's great to see you again. We've had some great progress that we're making, but I also want to know about what you need. What are you looking for? How can I help you? And let me tell you, when it comes to building relationships with people who are just as busy and are just as harried as you are,
Mhm.
okay, showing that interest in them as a person and not just a target makes a big difference, and you get more meetings that way.
I think you're right, Joan, and I think it's a natural inclination. Humans, we're social, and our instinct is to naturally be interested in other people and to communicate and share. But I think there's a bit of a myth in business that you can't do that. But there's a great way, particularly now, when so many people are distant and a lot of us are working at home. Connect with people. It's okay to show interest. I'm so glad you said that, Joan. I think it's important.
Well, I mean, if you're the person on the other side of the table and you have to do meeting after meeting after meeting where everybody wants something from you,
Mhm.
having someone offer something to you is memorable.
It is. It truly is. I love your approach, Joan, but always have.
So going back to that two-speed market, right? We're hearing cash strapped, and it's not just a matter of investors looking at risk, but we're also seeing changes, obviously, with how the NIH is dealing with certain types of technologies, what Congress is doing relative to budgets for the NIH, how policies are changing and impacting the research pipeline. Um, and now we have, new models that are being, explored by CMS that will in fact impact things like pricing. And let me tell you, folks, if an investor is doing the risk calculation, and one of the biggest questions is how much they're going to be able to get paid for this product in the future, that impacts things. And so, I was speaking with some friends in Washington, D.C. Earlier this week, and one of AZBio's roles as the voice of Arizona's life science industry is to, um, you know, work with our elected leaders, make sure that they understand how things they're working on or considering impact the work that we're doing to make life better for people here in Arizona and around the world. And, I was very proud of our Arizona life science companies. We reached out to them on the weekend and said, we have an opportunity for you to, join a national conversation around some of these policies that are impacting investment on our industry right now. And those emails went out, and over the weekend, they all said yes, and they all signed on. So, those are examples where I don't want people on this call thinking that they're powerless, right? When it's tougher to raise early stage money, you have to get more creative. You have to get engaged. You have to get involved. And because, we shape the world that we live in.
Mm-hmm. We do indeed. I want to bring up something before I forget about this because it is something I'd like to tell young companies to think about. And you can get feedback from your state organizations as well. Believe me, if you reach out, someone will help you. Make sure that your slide deck that you're using doesn't have to be fancy, but that it's really clear. Imagine that that deck is being viewed as a printout by investors when you're not there to explain details. So making it easy again and getting advice on your decks, because I look at hundreds and hundreds of decks per year, and that can make a pretty significant difference.
Absolutely. And, again, in your deck, focus on the things that matter. So if I'm an early stage company, the key things that matter are, number one, who is your team? Number two, what is the project? What is the problem that you are solving? And number three, why are you the best person to solve it?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the three things for an early stage company that we're going to look at. Because what happens is it's so easy to say, well, my market is $20 billion and we're going to get 1% of it in the first year and blah, 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 blah. You do not know that. You don't even have a product yet. And so as you're putting it together, you really want to address that risk calculation. What's the problem? How big is the problem? How do you solve the problem? And how's that team going to do it? Because at the end of the day, they are looking for teams that can execute. And when you're putting together your deck, if you have people that have executed, if you have people that have brought a product to market, if you have people that have had good exits, okay, make sure it says that in your deck.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, some of the other investment trends that I heard, on the street, right, when I was talking with the investors as opposed to the companies. Number one, value is king, right? Many startups, especially the early stage ones, are really going to be pressured to deliver value. How can you, get to cash flow sooner? How can you leverage one company or one product in order to jump to the next product? How are you going to focus your resources and maximize them? Let me tell you, every investor I talked to, I said, you want to maximize your investment resource right now? Take your company and move it to Arizona, because in Arizona, we have the talent, we have the infrastructure, we have the ability, and we are less costly to operate a business, not just for your business, but for your people to live and work in your business. And that resonates with people. It used to be the idea that you could only be in Boston or California, and that's not true anymore. We've learned that during the pandemic, and we're seeing that in Arizona right now. Companies are coming to Arizona from all over the world. You saw a lot of international companies, showing up.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was really interesting. John Crowley from Bio was talking about China and the fact that, 10 years ago, there was a handful of companies in China that had anything.
Hmm.
That's not true anymore.
It has really changed.
And so, you know, I had the opportunity this year for the first time to actually moderate public companies
Hmm.
and at Biotech Showcase. And the companies that I moderated, two of the four were from overseas. And the interest in coming to the United States, the interest in telling the story, because this is, no matter where you are in the world, this is where your company wants to do business. And so we're seeing more and more of that, both with international visitors here in Arizona and around the country. Um, it surprised me the number of CROs that I saw from overseas that were really pitching hard right now, in this new environment where the Biosecure Act is raising questions about how they're going to go to market. But the same thing is with companies. They need to think about it, and the investors are asking, where's your work being done? Where's your pipeline? How are you going to address these changes, in the world economy? Have you thought about that? And also, has your board thought about that? The days of having a board, which is your friends and family, are over. You need qualified, experienced board members that are going to challenge you. That's what the VCs are looking for.
Oh, absolutely. And if you haven't had that conversation with your board yet, have it soon. And if you don't feel that you're getting the answers, consider adding other advisors and board members so that you can answer that question to the best of your ability and even say to that investor, this is what the conversations I've had, this is what I know. Do you have anything to add to that, or can you recommend any other thoughts?
Yep. And, it's interesting here in Arizona, we have a long partnership now with the National Association of Corporate Directors.
Oh,
And these AZBioPEERS sessions, we always have an ACD portion of that, every year. Because we do recognize that if our companies are going to be nationally competitive, they have to have nationally competitive boards.
it is very, very important. Um, I would say from my experience personally with the VCs is that of course they're looking at your product and what you're building, but they're betting on the teams just as much.
Yep. Okay, so as we look at these things, we talked about building relationships. It's all about relationships, right? You can't do a risk profile if you don't
Hmm.
trust the person that you're betting on.
Hmm.
But we can't go anywhere in any meeting without two little letters popping up. And it was very prevalent, as we moved across the streets at JP Morgan also, and that's AI. It was really interesting to get kind of the investors' take on, the importance of AI. What were some of the things you heard, Lila?
Well, not to claim predictive ability, but I have been saying for years because I helped found our Tech Bio showcase and I'm a scientist myself, is that AI has become like electricity. It is something that it is necessary in many cases for any type of drug development or prediction of success. Uh, it's just something that your team has to be familiar with. You don't necessarily, unless you're a larger company, need a full-size department or someone there, but you need to be educated about how it affects your therapeutic area and your goals. So again, it's almost like the conversation we just had about investors and questions about your team and what you're doing or where your trials are being done. Uh, be as educated as you can. And I know I keep repeating it, but lean on your state organizations and go to local events that talk about AI. Also, talk to any service provider as well. I know I keep saying that, but they often have greater resources that can help you with that. Above and beyond that, where I'm really seeing it make the biggest impact is with drug discovery. And I think that we all saw that one coming because trying to do these things physically is a machine can do that better. But please remember there are always things that people will need to be that will need to do things that machines can't do. So it's not a one or nothing.
And the other thing that really came out was don't put AI after your name if you're not using it,
Mhm.
right? If I am a company that is using AI to, find the next big, target, that's great. If I am a medical device company, especially in the imaging and radiology space, where AI really can make a huge difference in the way we diagnose and treat disease by helping the um, the medical professional dive deeper into what's happening inside the patient quickly. But at the same time, we're seeing it everywhere. Okay. You would not run around investor conferences saying, we're internet enabled.
Exactly.
But I can tell you 20 years ago, that's what everybody did during the dot-com bubble, right? Everything was, we are a web-based company. Well, yeah, okay, great. But how is that adding value to the product or service that you're going to bring out? If AI is a significant value creator, the investors want to hear about it. If you're using AI to put pretty pictures on your website and nothing else, don't be talking about AI.
A great example. If you're a company that, for instance, I'm thinking of one in particular that uses AI to do cognitive behavioral therapy as a mobile-based application, that is an appropriate way to say I am an AI company. If you are using AI to predict molecules for proteomic development, that is as well. But to combine your thoughts and mine, in many cases, it's just like saying, well, I have electricity in my building.
Yep. And so, those are things really think about whether it's AI or any other tool,
Mhm.
right? How does it add value to the end consumer? How does whatever technology you're going to be utilizing reduce risk for the investor? Why is this going to make your company more valuable in the future? It's the value creating add ons, whether it is AI or anything else that the investors care about. Now, you should know about AI, you should understand AI, you should be training your people on AI because it's changing everything. I will also tell you that investors that I talk to, and I talk to a lot of them this week and around this week, um, if you are using tools that are sending unsolicited pitches to investors, stop. It sends a very, very strong message that number one, you don't know what you're doing. Number two, you are not following the SEC guidelines to make sure that the person that you're pitching to is accredited. And you are annoying the heck out of everybody. And you're getting put on blacklists.
That's an
Don't
important
do
point,
it.
Joan. I've had some dinners with investors lately have talked about this, and word gets around. They talk about the
Mm-hmm.
companies that do this and just roll their eyes. So please be careful, be specific.
Yeah. And I mean, it's amazing. I got an email this morning that was obviously AI generated. It was sent to our accounting department, which guess what? We don't have an accounting at AZBio email. And it was an email that said that this invoice was approved. by me for $95,000. And I've never heard of this company. So be really, really careful. There are so many tools out there that are being abused right now. There are other tools that are being misused that can severely damage your reputation. So just make sure you know how to use these tools effectively to add value, because the investors are paying attention to that. If it doesn't add value, it doesn't help your pitch. If it annoys people, it hurts your relationship.
It does, and it's hard to recover from that. A way to think of it is business etiquette. And I think one of the hopeful things to take away from this is that AI business tools are not making people irrelevant. They're actually making the personal touch even more valuable.
If it's really personal.
Yeah, if it's truly personal. AI is a tool. I use Perplexity to help me with my writing, but I don't just pump something out. I examine it and having a dialogue with AI is a great way to get insight into things, but you can't just pump it up. It can't be done.
Yep. So, some of the emerging areas of innovation that really came out, right? Years ago, the focus was really all on pharma.
Mhm.
And then bio came to be, right, 20 years
Mhm.
ago. And then after that, Medtech became a big addition to Healthcare Week. We're seeing a lot of shifting. Medtech tends to have smaller acquisitions, right? And
Mhm.
2025 was a great year for M&A,
Mhm.
right? As a matter of fact, almost all of the big deals were M&A. There were very few high dollar IPOs. And because we see so much money in PE right now, right? We said $1 trillion is sitting in PE, $1 trillion is sitting with the strategics. We anticipate that M&A is going to be big again. But there's always that hope that we'll see the IPO market come back. And the IPO market is a function of market stability. People don't IPO when the markets are unstable. So again, that ties back to current affairs and the importance of paying attention to the markets. We saw some announcements come out from the administration. The markets did not like those announcements. They were related to tariffs. And then the policy changed, right? So the markets are very, very important, but that upswing and downswing in the markets makes it very difficult to do an IPO at this time. So I think we're going to see a lot more M&A activity even going into 2026, because things aren't going to stabilize a lot before the midterms. And that's my personal opinion. That's not anybody else's but mine. But as far as, what people are looking at, right? Biopharma, some of the things when I was talking with investors that were really kind of at that top were, not surprisingly, oncology, immunology, cardiometabolic diseases, some neurology, but they're looking for de-risked assets, right? They're not looking for that. You're going after the market where everybody else failed and you don't have data yet. That's just not where they are. Medtech, it was FDA cleared assets. But it's not just, did you clear it? But are people starting to use it? They want to see your adoption metrics. I remember in the health IT, in the old IT days, where all of a sudden everybody had an app for everything. Remember those days,
Yeah.
Lila?
Yeah, everything.
And everything, right? I have an app, invest in my app. What investors understand is you can have the greatest app in the world, but if people aren't using it, it has no value.
Exactly.
So with medical device, with health IT, it is all about your adoption and how is your adoption ramping and how sticky are the people that start using your app. And so those were the key questions that I was hearing from investors as I listened to
Mm-hmm.
people at the table next door to me, right? You know, how big is your market? What is your AUM? How are you going to make it sticky? And how do you keep them coming back?
Another thing to mention, because the screening that I did for investors was a lot of it was med tech. If you are involving a doctor in any of this, understand how that's going to affect the physician's workflow. Because even if the product is great, if you're putting additional pressure on already overwhelmed doctors with your med tech or digital medicine approach, that is going to be a major barrier.
And that ties into health tech, because,
Mhm.
the conversations that we're having with the hospitals are also getting squeezed big time right now on their, operations and profitability. And so they are actively looking at ways that they can improve efficiencies and save money. Um, but there's no way, if you think of VCs risk averse, try talking to a hospital,
Mhm.
right? They are very risk averse. So you really need to make sure that when you approach those hospitals, your pitch is clean.
Couldn't agree more.
So the other thing that I started to hear about was, and this goes back to the AI discussion and the health IT discussion, is the expectation that there's a great consolidation coming, right? There's all of these small companies that are coming up with all of these innovative ideas, and they're going to get sucked up, right? So it's going to be combination, combination, combination. So whether you're in a therapeutic area where we've always relied on the strategics, or you're in health IT and health operations area with your innovation, making sure that you're having those strategic conversations is really important, because your clearest exit path could very well be through a consolidation.
Absolutely. And I think that, and correct me if you disagree, Joan, I think that we've seen with pharma, and we can extend this through the model with med tech, et cetera, and tech bio and device, is that external small companies are the engines of innovation. And at Biotech Showcase and our other events at BioFuture New York, uh, these are companies that are operating in a way where they can really create new and interesting things that accelerate what's going on in big companies. And just make sure that people know about it. Whatever you need to do to be searchable on the web, to be at conferences and at local events. The thing that you don't want to happen is for another company to have that success, that nice exit, because an acquirer didn't know you were there.
Yep, absolutely. And whether you're, especially if you have a product that is going to be integrated into that clinical workflow,
Hmm.
working with all of the clinicians and making sure that they know what you're doing, and actively ask them to poke holes in it, right? Because they will help you make it better.
Yeah, don't
And
be afraid of that. You definitely want people to pressure test you. It's a privilege to have that.
absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about, and I think it's really important, not just what happened at JPM, but what what comes next, right? What should our companies be doing to really focus in on, you know, being successful in 2026 and beyond?
First and
And
foremost, yeah.
and we talked about, using our professional services partners, leverage, the importance of showing up at conferences. So one thing that we're doing this year at AZBio that I'm really excited about is we're going to have the AZ Advances Health Innovation Showcase during Arizona Tech Week.
Sweet.
And this is not an investor conference. This is going to be where our health innovators are going to do talks that are going to be recorded on the value of their health innovation. And then they're going to get those videos that they can then utilize in their outreach, because value is the number one thing that we want to talk about. But that's one example. You mentioned BioFuture. What is BioFuture?
BioFuture is Demy-Colton's, the company that I work for's East Coast event, which in many ways reflects Biotech Showcase. So it's the opportunity for companies to be on panels in their therapeutic area, and we cover all therapeutic areas, and also pitch to a different group of investors. There's definitely West Coast investors out there, but there's quite a few from the East Coast and from Europe who are looking for new companies. It is focused on younger companies that are innovative. We call it BioFuture because it's about the next 5 to 10 years of getting things done. So it's not a futurist conference. It's about building the sidewalk in front of us. And while we do talk about regulation and the political environment, we also just talk about the important and very hopeful things that our industry can contribute to the world and also help investors get returns.
Well, and I would think, especially with it being in New York, that there are a lot of investors sitting in that audience listening because they need that information to make decisions.
They do, and they need to find these companies. BioFuture is a place where you will see companies that you won't otherwise. And we've had the good fortune of having Arizona companies there as well. So if you would like to join a panel, do reach out to me. I'm always happy to chat.
That's great. And the other thing I wanted to touch on is, I get invitations like every day. Come to my executive summit, come to my peer group meeting, come to there's so many of those. You guys have been having executive summits where it's a small group where they're
Oh, the
working
CEO
on their
summit.
business.
Yeah.
What are those about? How's that
So
different?
we have two events within this group. We have our Biotech CEO Summit, which is now in its 10th year, and it takes place in Napa, California in July. And this is a confidential meeting of 50 CEOs and a few key advisors on the challenges of being a life science CEO and how to face those challenges, resolve them, and have profitable outcomes. So we have CEOs return to this year after year. It's also where you can build a network of other CEOs who can provide you with resources. And I highly recommend it. We've had many Arizona companies there. We lose CEOs when they exit, when they have exits or move on to another role. And we're also doing a one-day version of this that is open to not just CEOs, but other titles as well, called our Executive Clinic. We're having one in February in New York. So please do join us, and we would love to hear from you. So my contact information will be available, and I'm happy to jump on the phone.
And I can't let everybody go without reminding all of our entrepreneurs that applications for the White Hat Life Science Investor Conference are now open. So White Hat is our biggest and most impactful event that we do every 2 years with the investor community. We have one of the best ratios of investors to companies in the country. Okay. There are very few conferences where you have 32 companies pitching to 200 investors.
It's one of my favorites, Joan. You know that.
And so the competition is fierce, and everybody that applies is actually going to have their application scored by real investors in their space. And so whether you get picked or you don't get picked, the feedback that you can get is invaluable. And so start early. Applications close in May, and the main stage will open up in October. So get your applications in early. It's really important to do that. And on a positive note, I want to end our closing thoughts on a positive note. Lila, what good thing are you looking forward to in 2026?
Wow, there's a number of things. But I think that one of the things that I'm looking forward to the most is, and we talked about this, is how new technologies will further propel and speed up new discoveries, new platforms, and to a certain degree, new cures. I think we've entered the age of cures, and there's a lot of noise right now about other things, but things are, we're getting to a place that we've tried to get to for a long time, and I think we're going to see amazing new science.
Thank you. And, as I look out through 2026, I am so excited about the potential that I see with so many of our life science companies here in Arizona. And we at AZBio look forward to helping them tell their stories, but more importantly, helping them move forward because that's the best thing that can happen for all of us. So with that, thank you everyone for joining us for AZBioPEERS. We'll be back again in February. Have a great 2026. Bye-bye.
Bye.